IVT's Computer Systems Validation and Software Assurance Week is back and better than ever. The acclaimed source for delivering regulatory updates, evaluating novel system integration methodologies, and discovering the latest in digital innovations, CSV Week 2021 delivers a 3-day virtual conference experience. Backed by 2 decades of industry insights and educational training, this is the most recognized event for CSV professionals to navigate the digital transformation, realize excellence in next-generation approaches to quality systems, share lessons from the field, and strategize on industry best practices. Hear from top pharma and biotech executives, gain exclusive insights from FDA speakers, and be part of the CSA and digital transformation discussions while leveraging unlimited network opportunities with colleagues and key decision makers. Plus, our all-new digital badging and GMP credit system is now available. You won't want to miss it. For all the information, visit www.informaconnect.com/CSV for all details on agenda, registration, and special group rates for teams.
This is Voices in Validation, brought to you by IVT Network. IVT Network is your expert source for life science regulatory knowledge. Voices in Validation brings you the best in validation and compliance topics. We interview industry experts from pharma, biotech, med devices, and laboratories. Here is the host of Voices in Validation, Stacey.
Thank you, and welcome to another episode of Voices in Validation. We're glad to have you with us again today. This episode today is based on a recently published book, Principles of Parenteral Solution Validation and Practical Lifecycle, a Practical Lifecycle Approach, I should say. Which was recently reviewed as well in the Journal of Validation Technology. So we are lucky enough to have the author, Igor Gorsky, here with us today to discuss the history of parenteral process validation and why the resources in this manual are so important in this day and age. So welcome, Igor. It's great to have you with us again.
Thank you so much, Stacey. It is a great honor to be invited, and it's great to participate in this discussion, and thank you very much for looking at my book and reading it and providing us with a review of the book. It's always very important. Once again, thank you very much.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you, Igor. You've been such a wealth of information for us when it comes to process validation, and so we were excited to be able to have a look at your book and do a review. And I thought it'd be great for our listeners to have a chance to hear a little bit more about this really important manual. So if you want to kick us off today with just an overview of that book, we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, once again, thank you very much. So the book is not that long. It's a little bit less than 300 pages. It's being published at the Elsevier, which is one of the premier publisher of scientific journals and now books. Previously, this was one of the Informa platforms, which is also have a lot of a wide spread in the scientific community. The book came about as a suggestion from there was a series of red books on the process validation on the pharmaceutical technology it actually initially came from the Thompson, and then it went to Wiley, and then it went to Pharma. And eventually they suggested that would be an interesting idea to publish a book like that. There are several books like ours on the market, but they're a little bit different, and we'll talk about that later. It has 13 chapters, and I'm not the only author. I am a principal author of most of the chapters, but there's also 7 authors, which I want to mention here. It covers all the subjects of the life cycle of process validation as it outlined by the regulators. and as it should be, outlined, practically. And it also talks about the on one side of the book, it talks about the prerequisites to the process validation, such things as the design and planning, the aseptic process validation. We'll talk about that. The QRM, quality risk management, and then the quality risk management for the process validation specifically. And then it goes through things like statistics and cleaning validation that are kind of prerequisites or helping factors in the validation cycle. And then at the end, it talks about a couple of subjects that are more important from sterility perspective. So we are hoping that we will touch on that. So we'll talk about the environment, we'll talk about the isolators, and the integrity testing for filters, as well as thermal filtration. So it is not an encyclopedic compendia, and it was not designed to be that. It's designed to popularize the subject, and that's why I think it's important, because it's easy, it's very
approachable, right? It's very approachable, yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. So one of the reasons I wanted to do this is for people not to be bogged down with a massive amount of information, because we have information all around us. It's
right.
It's all about popularization. Okay.
Which is so important when it comes to processes, right? Because if they're too long or cumbersome, then people aren't going to read it.
Well, very true. They're only going to open them if they're looking for case studies, and typically you're not that lucky to get your specific information in there. So yeah, it was more about, and I think we wanna touch on that, and I'm hoping that I'll touch on that a little bit later as well.
We have plenty of time to touch on a lot of things. So Igor, thank you for describing your book. I think people have a good sense of what it is. It sounds like there's a lot of different perspectives in it. I know you had a few other authors in addition to yourself bringing some information as well. So let's talk a little bit about the term parenteral, which pertains to medicinal preparations that are delivered via injection, which of course means that sterility is a requirement. So what is unique about process validation with parenteral solutions?
Yeah, so the one thing I didn't mention, my co-editor and co-author, Harold Baseman, who is the Chief Operating Officer for Valsouce LLC. I want to thank him for coming in when I was in the middle of this, and I've asked them to kind of help me with this journey. It wasn't quite a long journey, so he, and the reason why I'm mentioning him right now is because a couple of these parts that are specifically related to a parenteral element of the process validation were written by him, as he is one of the premier consultants, premier experts on the aseptic process simulation. Simulations. So what is the difference? There's no difference between the validation of any type of medicinal preparation. Medical device for that matter. Okay, so everything is basically follows the same exact concepts. Okay? But what's different about what are the elements that you want to actually stress is obviously sterility. So it's just one word, sterility. Okay. Now, there are multiple different things or multiple different studies that you want to conduct to assure that. Okay. So as we said, there's a life cycle involved, and then there was a separate issue that throughout that life cycle you've got to maintain sterility. Okay, and it means free of any bacterial or microbial egress or microbial contamination and cross contamination. Okay, and with that, we're talking about viruses as well. Okay, viruses, endotoxins, anything that involves microbiology. So we're talking a part of the validation effort then is not just this life cycle, method or life cycle way of doing things, but also things like aseptic process simulation, right? Things like filter integrity, things like environmental monitoring, okay? Personnel monitoring, and these are literally regulatory expectations and regulatory requirements. So if you look at the process aseptic process or sterile process guidances, you will see all of these studies that have to be performed. Now, will those studies prove that you will not have any issues? All they can do is they would decrease the probability of you contaminating due to your process or due to your environment or due to your personnel. And that's what you need to be always on the lookout and always checking. And then there are various pieces of equipment that are designed to prevent these types of contaminations, right? Things like isolators, right? So we discussed isolators. Things like sterilizations, right? Autoclaves, purgination tunnels, depurgination tunnels, right? And we're discussing those as well. Cleaning, which may involve steps of sterilization, right? This is a difference. So to put it in a nutshell, it is basically spending a lot of money and a lot of effort on providing a sterile environment for your production, so that and your ingredients and your equipment, which is typically single-use equipment. There's a lot more effort and a lot more budgetary constraints and a lot more studies just based on these elements.
Okay, fantastic. So, Igor, you mentioned a couple of times the life cycle approach, and I know it's in the title as well of the book, to validation. So why is life cycle long regulation critical in pharmaceuticals?
A while ago, starting with, if we come back to the beginning of the 21st century, or actually at the end of 20th century, FDA had come up with this initiative called CGMPs or GMPs for 21st century, which was an effort to bring new technologies, risk-based approach, scientific approach, new equipment, new way of thinking into this industry. So the industry has been very siloed, okay, where the literally research and development would not be that involved, as long as they throw their products onto the production onto the commercialization, they may not have been given enough information, enough data, and at times even in the scale up was up to the commercial organizations, right? So the problem with that is that the main part of the R&D was to develop this drug, develop this process, and clinically the process should work, and at least on a small scale the process should work. And then boom, we're going to throw this into the operations, and the operations would somehow, scale it up with their equipment, which could be different than equipment, and may even impact the product itself because of the physical and chemical characteristics of the product, right? And then eventually, when it's commercialized, the validation part of that was a very brief, typically a 3-batch exercise. You would write them up in these huge binders, and you would sign them, and these would be golden binders. And you would put them on the shelf, and then you start commercializing, and you would start having problems. Okay, and there was a lot of problems. So there were so many problems that FDA actually were one of the first to admit that this doesn't work. Okay, so the word validation came up, and the validation was basically at that time providing documented evidence, thus the binders, right? So FDA said, no. Let's talk about data collection, okay? And that data collection should start from the time you start creating this process to the time when you commercializing and finishing up with this process and divesting the product, okay?
And even post-market too, right? You're still, even when you're getting feedback from consumers, you're still...
Absolutely. Right. See, that's the problem. The problem is the lack of sharing of that information created these siloed group that basically didn't have a story for this product. Right. So anytime when you would have an issue, and now of course I'm kind of exaggerating, but this is what actually this is the idea of the book, right? So it's a generalization of what happened. So what they would do is they would have an issue. Let's say they would have, and that's a good example that you brought up. They would have a complaint. The complaint would come to the complaint to your pharmacovigilance group. They would look at the complaint and they would typically say, of course not saying everybody said that this is one-off, and so it's an isolated issue. And if the issue would exacerbate over time, then they would start digging, and that would take time and money, and a lot of products were taken to the market because of these things. So FDA came up in 2010, 2008, with a draft of this process validation guidance. It now talks about life cycle, but the life cycle was there to begin with,
right,
in the early 70s. Okay, so the idea was that you follow your product, that you learn from your product. Okay, but of course the industry is driven by money. So actually, you brought this up. A good example of that might be not. So we just saw yesterday, day before yesterday, a situation at one of the facilities that were manufacturing a vaccine, right? And basically what seemed to happen is that they did not control the recipes. So or formulation. Okay, I don't know exactly what happened, but it seems like the one recipe went for the other recipe, and that's what Rush does. This is what the lack of that information does. I'm not blaming it for anything, but I think it's one of the examples where you've got to step back, you've got to follow that cycle, you've got to follow your story, then you would not be bogged down with the minutia of things where you're driven by rather time and money rather than by science and risk. So that's what the difference is. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm not saying
that was an unfortunate thing to happen this past week. 15 million doses, I think, of that product need to be discarded because somewhere in the process something failed, and obviously the no good. So
typically a failure like this is a systemic failure, and I will call this a validation failure because I tend to step back and look at the big picture. Where did we fail, right? So these things are not one-off. These things are driven by. Nobody will tell you that this industry is not driven by money, right? It is, and it should be, right? We are in business to make money, but we are also in business to provide for the patient. Okay, so either you have errors and you discard batches, okay, and you think you're good because you're discarding these batches, okay, but the patient does not get you these batches. So something failed in that cycle, in the cycle of life, right?
Which is why it's so important to have these checks and balances prior to obviously releasing a product out to the public. I want to talk a little bit more about the life cycle approach from the FDA perspective, because I know that they have recommended a series of stages for process validation in terms of the life cycle approach. Can you just quickly highlight what those stages are, Igor?
Right. So it's a great segue from what we talked about. So it's just a continuation of the story,
exactly.
Which is good because this is what I'd like this to be, a story. So when they came about with this issue or question about the life cycle, they said, well, how do we make this into one this one journey? And there are basically three stages, which are phases. They call them stages, which now I think, personally, I think there's a little bit more stages there. Sure. But we'll cover all of them, okay? And we'll call some of them like if they're two A's, two B's, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So there's a stage one, which is process development, and that stage one gets its own guidance, which called ICH Q8. It's pharmaceutical development guidance. ICH stands for International Harmonization Conference, which involves FDA, EMEA, Ministry of Health of Japan, and now everybody involved in there. So I think now over 70 organizations involved in including people from WHO and whoever. So it's an international global guidance. So everybody's on the same page. Okay. So I'm very much for globalization. Otherwise, it's a crazy world. Okay. So everybody does what they're supposed to do, and they have GMPs for the internal market and GMPs for external market, which is terrible. So the pharmaceutical development, then the second stage has two elements to it. It's called a qualification stage. Right? So the qualification stage is stage 2, and it has stage 2A, which is qualification of equipment, facilities, and utilities. So the reason why you want to do them is to eliminate variability. So this FDA guidance on ICH is all about variability. Okay, so all the processes are variable, right? Just like any process in your life, right? You don't drive same speed all the time, right? Maybe you feel so, but it's going to be different at every part of the road. Okay, a little bit different, right? And then the stage 2B is the process qualification. So you eliminated the variability, or you identified variability due to your equipment, right? Equipment, facilities, utilities, in those parts, the mechanical parts. And now you're talking about the process, how do you apply this equipment to your process, right? And you qualify that through series of batches or campaigns or whatever else you decide to do with that. Okay?
Right.
And then the third part is continuation of data collection, right? So remember I said that previously it was providing documented evidence, right, without saying what that evidence is. Now the validation is collection of data and analysis and evaluation of the data. Okay, so you collect the data from the stage 1 to stage 2 and to stage 3. The stage 3 is also a split into, I would say now based on experience, probably into a couple of parts, right? Stage 3A, for instance, would be right after your qualification, where you decide to collect data with maybe more than sampling, okay? Because during your qualification, you want to do extensive sampling so you understand, a little bit more about commercialization of your product, commercial scale. So you can assess your so-called intra and inter variability. Okay, so between the batches, within the batch, and between the batches. Okay? So you want to know variability from perspective of your one individual batch. Are you harmonized? Are you homogeneous? What is your common uniformity or blend uniformity or whatever? And then you want to see how these batches compare to each other. Okay, and when you're doing that, you obviously have several batches only. So you want to continue doing that for a little while, right? And then at some point you collected a lot of data, and you probably want to, now you're looking at the practicality of data collection. You may want to reduce some of the sampling. You may want to reduce some of the quality attributes that you're doing. And we didn't talk about that, but I think we'll be touching that a little bit later. So these are the main stages, and then probably somewhere later in the life of this product, as this is a life cycle, right? You may want to even always assess. So there's going to be somewhere probably a 3C when you are looking at that practically, when you're conducting risk assessments and saying, okay, well, do I reduce or increase the sampling? Okay? How do I understand this? Now, one thing to remember at that stage 3. So the practitioners and these encyclopedicians of process, people like Deming, Schuhart, Taguchi, they're teaching us that the process always shifts, and it always does. Why? Because of equipment, because it's getting old, because of hiring new people, because of your facility getting old, okay? Because your materials somehow getting changed, okay? So all these things you may or may not be aware of. And that's the reason for this monitoring, right?
Right, because we don't produce drugs in a vacuum, right? So every little thing that goes on in the production facility can ultimately have an effect on the process, right?
Right. Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why they're probably somewhere there is probably stage 3C, 3D, or whatever, so that after 20 years we're not going to come back. So there is a cycle of life through pharmacovigilance, right? So you don't know what these things are related to. A lot of things related to the process as well, rather than just the therapeutics or clinical impact, right? So you always have to be on your toes to make sure that you understand your process and you know where you're at.
Exactly. And that's an important
Okay.
part of stage 3, right? The continued process verification, which, as you mentioned, provides data back to us as the drug manufacturer, which is then supposed to be used in optimizing the control strategies in an ongoing manner. And that's, of course, a current expectation under FDA guidance, and one, though, that some have been slow to adopt fully. So I wanted to get your perspective on what you think the issues with traditional CPV or continued process verification methods are, and then give us an idea where you think we are as an industry in terms of doing this CPV well. So let's start with one. What are the issues with traditional CPV methods?
Well, first of all, there are, when we're talking about traditional CPV data collection at the even previously, even before the validation guidance came out, people were looking at the this continued verification as typically an annual review, right? So when they look at the annual review, it's basically was a paper exercise rather than an exercise in risk and science review, okay?
Right.
Which could be much more involved, okay? Does it need to be more involved, right? So there's always the issue with traditional way of doing things is always this balance between how much of a resources we want to spend on this, and what do we want to do with this with regards to our time consumption, if we're okay, we may not, or we don't see deviations, and by kind of an exclusion, we're saying, okay, we're probably good if we don't see anything. Okay.
Right.
The biggest problem with that is the lack of system, less of a systemic approach, and less of the data being reviewed. Okay. So the good part is, and I'm kind of jumping into your second question. The good part is that if we would have talked 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, I would have said, the companies are just moving to the CPV. Okay, they basically thought the CPV was this annual process
checklist of processes, right? Yeah, instead of more of a continuous process.
Instead of doing analysis, right? Instead of doing statistics. So when we talk about the APR, basically, a lot of people were doing like Shewhart charts, control charts, but they were not really looking at them from. They were just pictures.
Sure.
They were not driven by this analysis of data. Is this good? What does it look like? So yeah. This is my spec. It seems to be inside. It seems to oscillate. Is that oscillation good? Is it bad? Is it trending? And so in a lot of cases, people would not do that is because I guess the biggest notion there is that I'm good because I passed.
Okay. And that is unfortunately the sentiment that we hear often in this industry, right? But it's not necessarily producing the best and safest products, right?
Never produces the best. So I've been in the industry now over, every year is more and more, of course, over 38 years. And it's scary. And so what I see is that eventually this lack of interest in data is going to bite you.
Right.
Okay. It's going to come back to you. Okay. Because if you do not respect your process, your data, the process and the data will come back to you. Okay. and consider the shift and consider some other things where you may not have looked at. Okay, so you might be trending, you might be, and I've seen that. So it's not a urban legend. It's a real thing. It will eventually come back to you. So when I come back to your second question, is the good part is that there is an interest. I can say I even go into, not even go, but I go to East a lot, to India, to Korea, to China, and I see them now exercising these approaches, which is, once you start doing something, it becomes a system, and it makes you, it gets you more information. So industry is moving into that direction.
Great.
Unfortunately, once again, we are driven by the bottom lines, and I'm hoping that people that are supporting these bottom lines are also those people that are supporting these approaches. So very, very important for us to continue doing this. So the industry is getting there. It's moving towards that direction.
And that is good news, Igor. And I know in your book, you included several case studies. I'm hoping that you can maybe share some insights from one or two of those about the implementation of either CPV programs or making your CPV programs better.
Right. So I just want to show here a couple of pictures, couple of charts, and a couple of tools that's kind of present a case study for in this book, and of course this is a copy of the title.
Yep, the cover of the
cover. Yep, the cover. So when you look at the and now I'm showing the tolerance interval plot for one of the quality attributes. So basically, we didn't talk about the nitty-gritty of the actual process validation approach, and what that approach encompasses is that you would look at your variables and your attributes, and the variables are the things that are the inputs of your process, right? Your temperatures, your pressures, your time, various variables of the process, and then your outputs are your attributes, which are things like assay, bioassay, microbial assay, so on and so forth, impurities, and other things. Okay, so each of these attributes and each of these parameters should be analyzed, and correlations should be found. Okay, because your process results in these in your attributes that you are looking for, right? The attributes that should be that should outline your product, right?
Right.
So in this case, we're looking at the some kind of an assay, and we got a bunch of the results from 14 batches, and it shows us kind of a very so this is a method, a statistical method that allows to calculate based on a number of samples, or in this case, and the so-called tolerance interval, which is a probability that certain portion of your batch will meet your acceptance criteria. So in this case, what we can say is that 95% of the batch, which is a very good, in any process is a very good number, will meet your acceptance criteria with 95% confidence. Okay, so I'm not going to go into statistics of that, but it's good. Okay,
that's good,
so
right? 95% is good.
95 is good, right? So So then you can also calculate 99% of things of these and the other thing to mention that these samples should be statistically relevant, statistically significant for you to do. Now, in this case, the sample size is 28. Whatever that is, it's either within the batch or outside the batch, within the batches. But this is a process capability. It's another statistical method that shows where you are. So just from you to look at this, on the right side of this graph, you see two boxes that show CPK and PPK. The CPK is capability of this process in right now time, and the PPK, it shows capability in the future, which is almost the same. And this calculation is done, takes into consideration within the data analysis as well as overall analysis. And you can see you calculated low and upper limits. So the good illustration of that, underneath you see this little box, it's not actually little, so a wider box that shows ppm.
Right.
And those are failures per million, okay? And you can see all of them are zero. So this tells you that your data is good, you're very much centered around your target, and that the probability of you having a failure in 1 million samples is nothing, zero. Okay, so when you look at the CPK of 9.56, this is actually great. Okay, so when you look at the the case study of how to really put this into a measurable way or a visible way for you to capture this and to look at this on monthly, quarterly, semi-annual basis, you can do this kind of a chart. Or actually here you see several things going here for this, and I call this a dashboard, right?
Yeah.
So what you see here, all of your quality attributes. Remember, those are outputs, right? And calculated data. So any data on the bottom, you see what the stage 3 analysis. How do you represent that? So from right to left, the PPK accepted. You may have this capability that maybe is lower than you want it to be,
mm-hmm.
but you do pass. Okay, so there could be a process where just like any risk, when you look at the risk, you can either mitigate the risk or accept the risk. Obviously, your choice is better to mitigate it, but if you can accept it. Okay, so those would be in blue, and then those that you want to mitigate, and there are below 1, right? Then you're looking at a red color, and they're below 1, right? So you get below 1, and then those that are a little bit above it, like there would be in yellow between 1 and 1.67, right? And then you obviously want to be above this 1.67, and you want to be in green, right? So some people have this at 1.33, and just to a lot of people know what Six Sigma processes are. So when you look at the process that is above 4 Sigma, you're looking at the very controlled process, and that would be 1.33. 1.67 would be your Six Sigma process. Okay, and then you can see all of your CQAs or critical quality attributes in the pie chart, and that would kind of show the entire process, right? And then on the right, you will see the flow that most of the attributes go up. Some of them may be individual ones, maybe go down. So we want to concentrate on how do we improve them. So that kind of that's what you kind of look at, and this is different than traditional way of looking at things, right? This is more of a visual way of seeing the entire picture for that product.
Yeah, and it helps to really analyze the data in a more visual way, as you mentioned, and really gives you a good picture kind of where you are with your processes at that point in time, right?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. And of course, for our listeners who are just listening and not watching the video, we definitely will make these charts available for you to download and you just through our show notes. So definitely look for those so you can follow along with that part of the conversation. Igor, I wanted to ask you if is CPV related to quality by design standards, and is that especially an especially important point for organizations with legacy systems?
Yes. So we often talk about just to come back to the book may be used not just for the parenterals. It could be used for any dosage form, as it does concentrate on those parenteral elements like sterility, but from perspective of the quality by design, obviously the quality by design is a part of the stage approach to the life cycle, and whatever you did in stage 1, which should be your QBD, okay, you may or may not have followed QBD, and literally what QBD stands for is designing your processes based on the design of experiments. Okay, so when you design your process, you would identify. Remember, we talked about CPPs and CPWAs, quality, critical process parameters, critical quality attributes. You really, literally have to design the experiments looking at what's critical and how you're going to achieve that. Now, you want to, throughout the process, and at CPD, you want to see, was I right? Because at QBD, you will develop an equation,
right,
for your quality attribute. So, and that equation is literally the polynomial equation. Okay, again, I don't want to go a lot into the math, but it's a polynomial equation that has, x, y, z, and certain numbers in front of that x, y, z. So, and those numbers will correspond to the temperature of this range, the pressure of this range, the time at this range, and so on and so forth, right? Or whatever element or whatever process parameter you want to put in there, and that would result in some in some quality attribute being between your specification. So now you want to come back with that data at CPD, and say, am I there? Did I design this by? Is my design adhering to what I thought it is? Okay. So if design is robust, and by the way, if you are a student of statistics or student of engineering, and you are going to school there to study these subjects, the quality by design is actually, in some courses, are titled robust design courses. So these are design of experiments courses. Okay, and so the question is my process robust? Okay? Right. So now you're getting really a lot of information, because in QBD, when you're doing QBD, it's very limited data, and you want to design it smartly. Not because you don't want to spend money on it, but because it is a practical process. You do want to do it on timely basis, because what's your goal? The goal is to get to the patient, right? Better, faster, cheaper, right?
Exactly. No, exactly.
So this is the origin of QBD. You just have to do it smartly. Some people don't use QBD. Some people, do it. Oh, you know what? We're just gonna increase this a little bit here, decrease this a little bit here, without really studying these increases and decreases. So that's the whole science of the design of experiments, of how to do them. obviously you want to do as much as possible, but within the within your budget, okay?
Right.
Because it could be costly as well. And then at the end, you are collecting at stage 3, you are collecting that data. So that's your risk assessment. You're coming back and you are applying that data to your design. Make sense?
Which is important, right? You have to have your benchmarks and your series of checks and balances, and constantly making sure that what you had planned to happen is happening, and that you are producing the product that you set out to produce.
Yep.
So, Igor, and of course, these processes are, you know, the CPV and quality by design, they've been around for a long time. Companies are familiar with them. Hopefully, most are using some form of checks and balances in their day-to-day processes. But I want to talk a little bit about technologies, advanced technologies, because, you know, the latest technologies and advances, of course, with them, we can create more innovative methodologies based on machine learning and predictive analytics. You talked about analytics, and that's getting a little bit easier for us to do with AI and other sorts of technologies, which of course can be used for CPV as well. Are we there yet that we're really taking full advantage of the technologies that are out there for this process verification?
That's a very good question. So we were technically there 20 years ago even, right? There are some in silico and some analysis platforms out there that allow you. I'm not gonna, you know, we're not selling a product here, but you know, people can look up and see what they are. But they are out there. What I want to mention here, based on your, to answer your question, is the industry there? The tools are there. Okay?
Yeah, that's what I mean. But are we there as an industry really leveraging these tools? I mean, I know the tools are there, and some companies are better than others at taking advantage of them. But talk to me about the industry as a whole.
The industry as a whole is definitely not there. Okay. So what we're doing, what people like I'm doing, is that recently, about 6 months ago, let me step back. There is a PDA technical report 60, which is a report on the, and these are guidance as well, report, but they're called technical reports. So for PDA is Parenteral Drug Association, right? And it's one of the largest association, or different largest association that deals with parental subject in the industry. It's a volunteer association. For those who doesn't know, typically your listeners most definitely should know that. So they are very active in it, and I'm part of the several revisions of these technical reports. Is the association writes and issues or publishes these technical reports. So one of them is on process validation called TR Technical Report 60. So 6 months ago, we started the revision of that document. It was initially issued in 2013. And there's a very large group of people, about 20 people all around the world. And there's a whole section there on the CPV where we're lucky enough to have those scientists that are specifically working on the electronic or software solutions. And they are working on the solutions that have to do with these in silico simulations of where the actual process goes, and what correlates to what. Okay, I think we are, as the industry, we tend to be very, and I hate the word conservative, because it's not really what people don't understand what it means, but we are conservative in the way that we are really impeding our own progress. By definition, we don't want to change. Okay? And one of the reasons is that we're denying that idea that the process will change. right? So we think, oh, it's all set in stone. It's not set in stone. So yes, we're moving towards that direction. Are we there yet? No, we're not. Nowhere near yet.
Right.
So there are companies that purchase, and I know these installations. I've done 3 or 4 installations of these analytical tools, analysis tools, and those tools are really, when we're going to look at them 20 years from now, we will say that they were literally Neanderthal. Okay, but with lack of better things, there is a movement. It's very slow.
Right. Okay. Well, we're making progress, even if it is a little at a time. But the important, the important takeaway, I guess, is that these tools are out there. They will be adopted, I would think at some point in time by the majority of companies, whether it takes us 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years to get there. And they're going to make it easier for us to analyze larger batches of data and really just, to understand our processes even better. So, as long as we're on the path, I guess that's a good thing.
It is a good thing. It is. The progress is always good.
Right.
Because if we stand still, nothing's going to happen. Right. So there's not going to be, faster, cheaper, better. Okay. So, nothing comes from nothing. So once again, the path is good. It would be great if regulators would, and I see more of regulators being interested because there's more people out there, and I'm happy to be part of that movement,
right?
To popularize this and to allow people to see that this is not. People get scared. Am I doing the right decision, right? Because we're dealing with a lot of money, and so the more people will get there, it's going to cost them less, and people will start understanding what they're doing, right?
Right,
so,
for sure.
So it's a very narrow edge that you're walking there with statistical analysis. What does it mean? Am I making the right decisions? Am I doing this because I'm told to do this, or I'm doing this to really understand things? Right? Yeah. So it's really about understanding. And one thing that I didn't touch on is that the quality, and I keep talking about that, the quality is really based on 2 things that enable it. Okay, one thing is understanding of risk that is involved, and the other thing, am I making decisions, those risk-based decisions based on knowledge? Okay,
right.
So you're not taking risks. Okay, you're making decisions based on what you know.
Right.
That's where the risk is. So the more you know, the higher the probability of your success. Okay, that's basically it. So 2 enablers to quality systems: risk management and knowledge management.
Right. So absolutely.
If you look at the ICHQ 10, that's exactly what they're going to tell you.
Exactly. No, they're critical. They're critical to everything that we're doing in the industry in terms of the quality and risk. So you have to know better, do better, right? That's just the way it goes. Igor, since you have such a great resource in this new book, I want to give you a minute before we wrap here to give it a little plug.
Yes. So please buy the book. I get royalties. I get those $5. It wasn't about $5. It was about really making sure that giving the industry another popularization tool. I do want to mention really quickly my co-authors, Hal Baseman, Mike Jonitz, Amanda McFarland, Lori Richter, Michael Sadowski, and Chris Smalley. They are authors of the book. And really, I would recommend people to read it. It's not, once again, it's not a rocket science. It's a popularization of the subject, and it gives them a good direction of what to use and how to use it. Now, once again, the guidances are changing.
Right.
But the reason for us to embark on this journey of writing this book was to get something that will stand a test of time. So there's a lot of information and a lot of specific information on isolated, and Bob said, on risk management. It gives you a good way of triage risk. So I think it's a very good resource. Even though I wrote it, and it's kind of uncomfortable that I'm telling you to buy it, but I believe that it's money well spent.
Yeah, I would agree. It is a great tool to add to your toolkit for sure. So thank you. We will include a link to the book, so you don't have to search for it on the internet, in our show notes. In closing, Igor, what last thoughts or ideas would you like to leave with our listeners?
Progress. Continue with the progress. Okay. Continue with the knowledge. Strive for knowledge. Okay. Continue with your understanding of your processes. Okay. With the knowledge of your products. Okay. Respect your process. Okay. Always respect your process. And when somebody tells you, "Oh, we don't have time," there's always time.
Right.
Okay? Don't worry about time. I'm not talking about impeding. I'm talking about take time to understand.
Mm-hmm.
Because eventually, not understanding, you will spend more time in trying to understand.
And resources, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll cost you more money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Shortcuts are only helpful in the moment. They're usually not helpful long-term.
That is cool.
Well, thank you again, Igor Gorsky, for being our guest today. It's been great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Always a pleasure. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Stacey. And I hope people enjoy it, really.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And
we appreciate you, Igor, sharing your expertise and your vision on this topic.
And I apologize for my second language. So.
Nope, that's good. I want to also give a shout out to our producer, Ben Kitchen. And lastly, I'm sending out my appreciation to you, our valued listeners. I am grateful for your time each and every week and for your help in sharing this podcast, which has led to our tremendous growth this past year. As always, if you enjoyed today's episode, please remember to subscribe in your podcast player of choice and be sure to share it with your friends, colleagues, and online networks so they can enjoy it too. Plus, send us a quick note or leave us an online review. We really do value your feedback and love to hear from you. For show notes and additional podcast resources, including links to Igor's book, please visit www.ivtnetwork.com. And we'll be back again next week with another innovative and insightful discussion. Until then, make it a great week.